it. How fantastic. But the work starts when you can't get the change, when you can't change the situation. So the point is, this is, it's not a moralistic issue, it's a very practical one. And I can't stress this enough. But we're so used to hearing all this stuff as in a moralistic way, like as if like as if we're kind of blaming ourselves. And this is why I like to use the examples of my friends in prison. Because they're in situations that they absolutely cannot change. So the friends I've met over the years, the last 20 years, running this Liberation Prison project, that's still now, I gave it up running it years ago, but I've still got friends in prison, and it's now run, a colleague of mine here in Sydney runs it, and in America as well. They're such a powerful example for me, the ones who used to write to us continuously, and then now are studying Buddhism, using the Buddhist techniques, using this approach of harnessing their craziness in these mad environments. They're very powerful for them because they absolutely cannot change the outside. They cannot open that door of their cell. They cannot leave prison. They cannot. Those on death row have no chance, especially in America with intensely long sentences. Forget about this. So this is the point the Buddha's making. This is almost too simple. When you can't change the environment, when you can't change the situation, and everybody in our lives every day has situations that aren't what we want, that distress us, that make us angry, get us jealous, depressed, that we're anxious about. There is absolutely no question. Everybody has life like this. But the point that Buddha's making is the reason we suffer, the main reason we suffer, and this is kind of shocking to hear, the main reason we suffer is not the busy traffic, is not the unkind boss. It's our own anxiety, our own inability to harness our crazy mind because we've never looked at it. So when a tense, extreme thing like busy traffic comes, we are literally not mentally equipped to handle it without losing the plot. We kind of can see that, If you've never worked on your anger, if you've had people do what you want all the time, you don't ever get angry, then suddenly you have a relationship with the person who doesn't do what you want, then of course you're going to get hugely angry. Then literally again, what Buddha's saying is the reason we're suffering, and it's not moralistic, is because of our uncontrolled mind, our berserk emotions. We're not equipped to handle this difficult situation. For us, it seems normal that when it's busy traffic, you get anxious. When the husband's going crazy, you get upset. We tend to think this is absolutely normal. But all the Buddha's saying is, yes, it's awful. Yes, the traffic's terrible. Yes, the hubby's crazy. I agree with you. But honey, I've got some tools for you that you can use to help you change your mind. This is all he's saying. It's not moralistic. It's not like you're the blame. It's an intensely practical approach that in reality we do every day. We're doing this every day. I would say, though, this is Buddha's expertise. He got this whole view about the mind and the degree to which we can become familiar with it and the degree to which we can harness it and then radically change it. That's his skill. That's what Buddhism is. It mightn't be so evident to us because we have very cliched views. Even Buddhists, I would suggest, have very cliched views about why you would want to be a Buddhist, why you'd want to do mindfulness meditation, to make it all go away, to have nice, pleasant feelings, to not have many thoughts. This is a very cliched and a mistaken take on it, I would suggest, So my friends in prison, because they haven't got the luxury to change their environment. So you've got two options. You go mad, or you change your mind. Honestly, it's that simple, although it's kind of infuriatingly simple. We're kind of always saying, but, So I always use this one example. I love this example. This woman I read about it years ago. And I think she must have visited Australia because I know Richard Feidler on the radio, he interviewed her a while ago, and she's written a memoir, and she's been on the BBC. She's this amazing woman who was more than 30 years ago, I think 40 years ago, was hitching. It was hippie, she said. Complete hippie with hippie kids, hippie hubby. And they were hitching in Florida. And they got picked up by two blokes, something like this. And then the coppers stopped the blokes, and the blokes killed the coppers and blamed the hippies. So they're on death row. I mean, you can't conceive of this if you think about it. Look how we feel when someone blames you for the tiniest thing that you didn't do. It's like a nightmare. It's like we still can't let go of that thing that Mummy said we did 20 years ago. It's so painful for us. The thing our brother accused us of, It's unbearable pain, isn't it? Well, there she is on death row. Husband is even executed. You can't conceive of such nightmare. Lost the kids. 17 years of hell. But the point is, I think she was doing yoga and things. I don't think she was a Buddhist. But she was doing yoga, whatever. But she said, this is what she said, and this is my point. At some point I realized I literally could change nothing. Nothing. She couldn't change the accusers, the guys who first accused, the jury, the judge, the prosecutors, the police, the wardens, whatever. The entire system from woe to go. Everybody was convinced that they murdered these police. Everything seemed to point to that, and they were totally and completely innocent. I think it's hard to conceive of the suffering, So I think the normal approach we would have, and look into our own lives, when such devastating suffering occurs, the husband got executed, I think we assume the normal approach is to go completely mad. And I tell you, I've met many people in prison, especially in America where there's so much injustice, I have to say. So much people, so many wrongly accused. They're all the poor people, of course. The rich ones don't. I've never heard of any rich people on death row. I have to say that honestly. So they'll get anyway. Whatever. It's too much, I tell you. It's all the poor people, So this woman, she said, I realized I couldn't change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. So I decided, I'm not a prisoner, I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell, I'm in a cave. So this sounds very romantic. We love to read these ideas. But if you just give it some serious thought for a moment, it is beyond bearing to think this. And all I can say is I think the unbelievable intelligence, and I mean that sincerely, that she must have had, the intelligence, the courage to cut past all the suffering, all the nightmare, because she was utterly innocent. And in a sense, that's what we feel. I'm allowed to be angry. I'm allowed to go crazy. He's completely insane, and we understand why he's insane, because of these terrible, unjust things. But she realized she could change her mind. And what does that mean? It's so simple, it's embarrassing. She changed the way she interpreted prison. She didn't see it as bad. She wasn't angry. She wasn't resentful. She wasn't freaking out. She must have had intense experiences, but she got to the point where she realized that her mind, her thoughts, her viewpoints, her opinions, her emotions were hers, and she could change them. All I'm telling you is that is Buddha's point. That's the essence of Buddha's point. That's it. It comes down to that. Now, we love to hear these words, but check the last time we even attempted to do it. The first one is the panic, especially when the thing that you're accused of, let's say, is completely not what you did, or even the mean husband. The thing that arises spontaneously in us, and our mummy did not have to teach us this, is how dare he do that? I don't deserve it. What have I done to deserve it? And probably in this life, nothing whatsoever. She certainly had done nothing in this life. And that's the point. She didn't maybe have a view. Buddhism has a view about karma. Christians have a view that it's all God's will, whatever the explanations are, even if you haven't got an explanation of why something is happening, still the point that she made is, which is the point that Buddha's making. If you can change it, hey honey, change it. But if you can't, then you change your mind. And why would you do that? It's so practical, because that was the source of her contentment, because she didn't go crazy. She remained a happy person. But she didn't give up, that's the point. She didn't give up. She never stopped fighting for her freedom, and she got it eventually. That's why I like to talk about the Dalai Lama. I'm trying to make him more than the sky, holy, We all can see he's a happy guy. If you've heard him talk, if you've read his books, he's this happy guy, funny, cracking jokes about his oppressors. The people who've destroyed his country in the last 60 years. He doesn't seem to have lost the plot. He doesn't get angry. He's not anxious. He's not neurotic. He's full of kindness and wisdom. He's strong. He's powerful. And he's never given up trying to change the situation in Tibet. Never given up. Socially, politically, psychologically, in every possible way, diplomatically, he never gives up. But he's not nuts. He hasn't gone mad with all the usual things that we assume are normal, because the situation's so terrible. This is the point that he's making. It's kind of so shocking in a way, so radical, but so incredibly simple, and we all do it every day to some degree. The red light comes, and you control yourself and don't go berserk. Shut up, Robina, it's only a red light. You just changed your mind. When you decide not to say something, when the hubby doesn't leave the toilet seat down yet again. Oh, give it a break, Robina. He means well, and you let go. You change your mind. I mean, we do it all the time, but we don't join the dots. We don't see how powerful it is. But this is, I would say, this is Buddha's expertise. And his view of the mind, it goes to much more depth than we're describing here. It's utterly fascinating. Because he even says, whatever goes on in our mind, whatever goes on here, is the main source of how the world appears to us. And I think that woman is an example. Her mind remained content, not berserk, not raging, not freaking out, These words are so simple, but we sometimes almost can't hear them sometimes. Because why? It's because we're overwhelmed by the outside world. That's what we look at and listen to from the second we wake up until the second we go to sleep. And our philosophical and psychological and scientific models reinforce that view, because that's where life is. We think life is out there, and we're sort of searching for the nice bits, and trying to avoid the ugly bits. Why? Because the nice bits are why I get happy, and the ugly bits are why I suffer. We take that as an absolute default assumption. Well, according to that assumption, everybody in prison should be out of their brain. And I know lots of people who are happy people in prison. And according to that, if you've got freedom and a nice hubby and 4.5 kids and 3 houses or whatever it might be, you should tick all those boxes and go, well, I should be happy. And the number of people that we know, including ourselves, tick the boxes and then see, why am I so full of despair? Why am I so depressed? Why am I so anxious? If we really do believe the outside world is the source of happiness, then we all definitely should be happy. But we know we're not. And then we wonder why. You check. The hubby loves me. The kids are there. The house. The job. So that's the logic. If I've got those things, then they're the source of happiness. And then I look at my mind, overwhelmed by anxiety, let's say, overwhelmed by depression. We absolutely know this. And then we have guilt because we think I shouldn't have this. Then we either suppress, we have to go to the therapist before we kill ourselves or the husband, I mean, we know this. That's why there's so much mental suffering among all of us. So we know people who've got a lousy external environment, who've got happy minds, and we know people who have everything perfect, who have got unhappy minds. So that ought to get us to question profoundly the assumption that happiness is when you get this and this and this, and suffering is when you get this and this and this. It's just logically not true. It's evident it's not true. But we don't join the dots, We just kind of shrug our shoulders and go, oh, well, no one knows, and sort of hope it goes away, Well, Buddha says it all comes from the mind. It's mind meaning your thoughts. And your thoughts inform your emotions. Your thoughts inform the emotions. Our thoughts inform our emotions. So these thoughts, Buddhist psychology says, really are working at a very subtle level. And we only notice them when they explode into emotions, which is when it affects our body. I think it's that, You might feel the rumblings of the anger underneath, kind of getting irritated, getting annoyed. And then one day something happens, and that's the straw that breaks the camel's back, and the explosion occurs. Isn't it? And the reason for the explosion is because we haven't paid attention to what's going on before it gets to the mouth, That's why equally you don't know what's going on, and you realise you can't get out of bed one morning because you're inert with depression. Oh, I'm a bit depressed. But it's been going on for years, years, let's say. So the Buddha's idea is very practical. He incidentally says we come into this life fully programmed with our own pasts. We don't come programmed with mummy stuff and daddy stuff and the monkey stuff. That's another discussion. That's the whole business of karma, which in our weekend course we're going to be talking about that tomorrow. That's an whole other discussion. But basically we can see since we're tiny children, we haven't kind of turned into some completely different person overnight. We can see all our tendencies back since we're children. The anger, the tendency to be patient, the tendency to be anxious, the tendency to be worried. We can see these. Our own little personalities are already formed quite tiny, So these are states of mind that are deeply inside our bones. And they're so spontaneous. Mummy didn't have to teach us. Mummy did not have to teach me to be angry. I had it down, I tell you. Well, darling, shout louder, Robina. Clench your fist more strongly. Beat your sister more. No, I knew how. I was good at it. You understand? We can see our little personalities way back then formed. And this stuff is so spontaneous. So because it's so spontaneous, many of our old habits, and because they're so instinctive, we don't question them. We just think, oh, well, this is who I am. I'm a depressed person. I'm a jealous person. I'm an anxious person. I'm an angry person. We define ourselves quite early on, and then we tend to set it in stone, you know. And then, of course, we assume I can't change. The stronger the habit, there's no question, the stronger we feel I can't change. This is who I am, what to do. Now, that's why it's been so marvellous this last 20, 30 years, isn't it? That the Dalai Lama and all the best brains in the Tibetan Buddhist world have been talking to the best brains in the West about science and psychology. It's extraordinary. And all this organisation called Mind and Life, they've organised many of these extraordinary meetings and have published them all. They're really quite remarkable. And I think many of the findings these days about neuroplasticity, how, as one scientist said, the greatest finding of the 20th century, that we're not stuck with the brain we're born with. Well, Buddha's basically saying since 2,500 years, we're not stuck with the mind we're born with, and we effectively refer to the same thing. And that's exactly the basis of the Buddhist approach, Buddhist practice, Buddhist psychology, Buddhist practice, you know. The mind is this infinitely flexible thing, and we get born with a bunch of habits.